The soil here is black, not brown, not gray, black, rich and heavy, the kind that clings to boots and turns fingers dark within minutes of touching it. For centuries, this earth has been pressed into bread, poured into vodka, woven into legend. It stretches for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, flat and endless, broken only by rivers that cut silver lines through the plains and by forests that darken at the edges of the horizon. There is a smell that belongs to this land in late summer. Sunflowers, dust, and diesel from a passing tractor, mixed with the sweetness of ripening wheat. There is a sound too, if the wind is right. The low hum of insects in fields so wide they seem to touch the sky, and somewhere far off, a church bell marking the hour in a village whose name has not changed in 500 years. This is not a place of one landscape. It rises into mountains in the west, softens into rolling hills in the center, and opens into steppe and sea in the south. It carries the memory of empires, Austro-Hungarian spires in one city, Ottoman echoes in another, Soviet concrete in a third, layered like sediment, never fully erased. This is Ukraine. From the air, the geography reads like a patchwork stitched from different centuries. In the west, the Carpathian Mountains rise green and mist-covered above towns like Ivano-Frankivsk and Uzhhorod, where wooden churches and mountain dialects survive largely untouched by the flatlands beyond. Lviv, further north, keeps its Habsburg-era cobblestones and coffeehouses intact, a city that feels closer to Vienna than to Kiev. The capital itself, Kiev, straddles the wide Dnipro River, golden domes catching the light above a skyline of Soviet blocks and glass towers rising in equal measure. To the east, Kharkiv hums with university life and heavy industry. To the south, Odessa opens onto the Black Sea, its port air thick with salt and the accented Russian and Ukrainian of generations of sailors and traders. Further southwest, Chernivtsi carries a distinctly Austro-Hungarian elegance, its old university building, a fantastical brick-and-tile residence once built for Orthodox metropolitans, now recognized by UNESCO as one of the most striking academic campuses anywhere in Europe. Nearby, the fortress town of Kamianets-Podilsky rises dramatically from a canyon carved by the Smotrich River, its stone citadel seemingly suspended above the gorge, a favorite backdrop for wedding photographers and hot air balloon festivals alike. To the north, Chernihiv guards centuries-old monasteries beside the Desna River, while the fertile plains around Poltava and Ternopil still anchor the country's identity as a land of wheat and sunflower. This film is not about the headlines, it is about something quieter and in its own way more durable, the rhythm of an ordinary morning, the taste of a shared meal, the small rituals that continue whether or not the world is watching. It is about how people actually live here beyond the news cycle and the accumulated texture of daily life. Morning arrives differently depending on where one stands. In Kiev, it begins underground, in the marble-clad stations of the Kiev Metro, one of the deepest transit systems in the world, where commuters descend past mosaics and chandeliers before boarding trains that rattle beneath the Dnipro. Above ground, trolleybuses and trams thread through wide Soviet-era boulevards, their electric lines crisscrossing the sky like a second, quieter grid laid over the city. In smaller towns, the marshrutka takes over, a shared minibus, half formal and half improvised, that stops wherever a raised hand signals it should, cash passed forward from seat to seat until it reaches the driver. It is inefficient by design and beloved for exactly that reason. It moves at the pace of the town it serves. Coffee culture has taken firm hold in the cities, particularly in Lviv, which prides itself, somewhat contested by rival claims from Vienna, on shaping the coffeehouse tradition of Central Europe. Small cups of dark, unfiltered coffee are drunk standing at counters or seated at window tables that look out onto pastel facades. In villages, the ritual softens into tea, often brewed strong and taken with jam stirred directly into the glass rather than added as sugar. The market remains the anchor of the neighborhood. Locally, it is called the Rynok, and every city has at least one, a covered or open-air maze of stalls where babushki, Elderly women who have sold from the same spot for decades offer pickled vegetables, sour cherries, honey in unlabeled jars, and dill sold in bunches so fragrant it perfumes the surrounding air. Meat vendors call out prices in short bursts. A woman weighs out sunflower seeds by the handful. A queue forms wordlessly, understood rather than announced. In Lviv, the old town itself functions almost as a living room shared by the whole city, a UNESCO-listed maze of cobbled squares, Renaissance courtyards, and Armenian, Polish, and Austrian architecture layered so closely together that a single street can shift centuries in 100 meters. Locals cut through it on the way to work the way others might cut through a park, pausing at a bakery window or a favorite bench without ever quite treating it as a tourist site. Apartment life in the cities is dense and vertical. Soviet-era panel buildings, their balconies overflowing with drying laundry and potted tomatoes, house entire generations of the same family within a few floors of one another. Village life moves differently. A single-story house with a fenced garden, a wood stove still used alongside a modern one, chickens in the yard, and neighbors who know without asking whose cow has wandered off again. The contrast between the two is not simply architectural. It is a difference in the shape of a day, one measured by transit schedules, the other by the movement of the sun. The Ukrainian language carries centuries of suppression and revival within it, banned at various points under imperial and Soviet rule, pushed to the margins of official life, and yet never extinguished, kept alive in villages, in poetry, in song. Its resurgence since independence in 1991, and especially in the last decade, has become inseparable from questions of identity itself. No garment carries more cultural weight than the vyshyvanka, the embroidered shirt whose cross-stitched patterns once told a stranger at a glance which region a wearer came from, the colors and motifs of Poltava differing sharply from those of the Hutzal Highlands. It is not a costume. It is worn with pride, at weddings, at graduations, on a single national day each May when entire cities fill with people wearing embroidery passed down through grandmothers or bought new for the occasion. Music runs on two tracks simultaneously, the bandura, a multi-stringed folk instrument plucked in the manner of a lute, still taught in conservatories and played at festivals, and a thriving contemporary scene that has, in recent years, carried Ukrainian language pop and folk-infused rock onto European stages. Faith has left its own architecture across the country, and nowhere more strikingly than in Kiev, where the golden domes of St. Sophia Cathedral and the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra rise above the Dnipro, their interiors lined with Byzantine mosaics nearly 1,000 years old. Beneath the Lavra, a network of catacombs holds the mummified remains of monks in candlelit alcoves, still visited by pilgrims who walk the tunnels by candle alone, the air cool and close and smelling faintly of beeswax. These are not museum pieces, but active places of worship, incense, and chant, filling them on any given morning regardless of the season. Among the holidays, none is observed with more ritual precision than Easter, known as Velykdyn. In the days before, families gather to create pisanki, eggs dyed and wax-patterned in intricate symbolic designs, each color and motif carrying old meaning. Red for joy, a pine tree pattern for eternal youth. On Easter morning, baskets containing pascha, a tall domed sweetbread, along with eggs, sausage, and horseradish, are brought to church to be blessed by a priest before the family returns home to break the fast together. Christmas Eve carries its own detailed ritual. A meal called Sviata Večeria, the Holy Supper, consists traditionally of 12 meatless dishes, including kutia, a sweet wheatberry pudding with poppy seed and honey, eaten first as the meal's ceremonial opening. Work and economy. It is a story of contrasts. On one hand, an agricultural tradition stretching back centuries, rooted in the Chornozem, the black soil that has earned the country its long-standing reputation as a breadbasket, a producer and exporter of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil on a scale that shapes global commodity markets far beyond its own borders. On the other hand, a rapidly matured technology sector, with Kiev and Lviv in particular becoming hubs for software outsourcing and increasingly homegrown startups staffed by a generation fluent in English and comfortable working for clients in Berlin or San Francisco without ever leaving home. Between these two extremes sits an institution that belongs to almost no formal economic category at all: the dacha, a small country house with an attached garden plot, owned or informally inherited by a striking share of urban families. It exists partly as insurance, a place to grow potatoes, tomatoes, and berries that supplement a family's table through the winter, and partly as psychological ballast, a patch of soil that is unmistakably one's own, tended on weekends as a form of quiet, wordless therapy as much as subsistence. In hard times, the dacha becomes essential. In good times, it remains beloved regardless. If one dish defines the country's table, it is borscht, the beet red soup whose name and ownership have themselves become a point of cultural pride. Its base of beets, cabbage, and root vegetables shifts by region. Some versions run meat-rich, others nearly vegetarian, some finished with a spoonful of sour cream, others with a raw garlic clove crushed straight into the bowl. It is served at Sunday family lunches and at roadside cafes alike, and to serve a guest a bowl of one's own borscht is to offer something close to an introduction of self. Alongside it sit vareniki, dumplings folded around potato, cheese, cherry, or cabbage fillings, and boiled until tender, then often pan-fried with onion. Holubtsi, cabbage leaves wrapped around a filling of rice and meat and slow-braised in tomato sauce, and salo, cured pork fat, sliced thin and eaten on dark rye bread with garlic, an ingredient that provokes as much affectionate humor as genuine culinary devotion. Home cooking remains deeply tied to preservation. Late summer kitchens fill with the sound of jars being sealed, pickled cucumbers, tomatoes, and mushrooms put up for winter in a practice that predates refrigeration and has never fully receded, even in cities. Hospitality at the family table follows an unspoken but firmly understood law. A guest is never allowed an empty plate, and refusing a second helping is treated as a mild social transgression requiring gentle, persistent correction from the host. Nature and outdoor life. The landscape divides cleanly into 3 registers, and each holds a beauty distinct enough to have shaped its own local mythology. In the west, the Carpathian Mountains rise in long forested ridges, their highest point, Mount Haverla, drawing hikers each summer along switchback trails that climb through beech forest into open alpine meadow. Wooden huts called polonini dot the high pastures, where shepherds still produce a smoked sheep's cheese called buds, using methods largely unchanged for generations, the air around them thick with wood smoke and wet grass. Deeper into the range, the glacial lake of Sinevere lies improbably blue against dark spruce, a place so still that locals speak of it in the hushed tone usually reserved for something sacred. Further south, the Carpathian National Nature Park protects some of the last old-growth beech forest in Europe, its canopy so dense that midday light falls in scattered coins across the forest floor. Along the south, the Black Sea coast draws swimmers and sunbathers to Odessa's beaches through the warm months, the water calm and faintly brackish near the shore, while further west, the resort towns near the Danube Delta open onto wetlands thick with pelicans and herons, one of the last great untouched river deltas on the continent. Between the mountains and the sea lies the vast steppe and forest steppe, drained and shaped by rivers, chief among them the Dnipro, which runs the length of the country from north to south, widening near Kiev into reservoirs fringed with pine forest and sandy beaches that fill with city dwellers escaping the summer heat, and the Dniester, tracing a quieter path through the southwest, carving a limestone canyon so dramatic in places that geologists have compared it to a miniature version of the American Southwest. In the very south, the Ascania Nova Reserve preserves a stretch of untouched steppe grassland where wild horses and antelope still roam, a landscape meant to recall how the entire country once looked before the plow arrived. Seasonal ritual follows the land closely. Autumn brings mushroom foraging into the forests around Kiev and Chernihiv, entire families setting out at dawn with baskets, competing gently over the best patches of chanterelles, the forest floor damp and smelling of decaying leaves and pine resin. Winter transforms the Carpathians into a quieter kind of destination, snow settling over the wooden churches of the Hutsul Highlands and drawing skiers to resort towns like Bukovel. Summer brings river swimming and, in rural areas, the harvesting of wild berries along forest edges, a practice that blurs the line between chore and pleasure. Baskets of wild strawberries and blueberries carried home to be turned into jam before the day is out. Long-distance travel still runs largely on rail. Ukzaliznytsia, the national railway, connects Kiev to Lviv, Odessa, Kharkiv, and dozens of smaller towns via overnight sleeper trains, a slower but deeply embedded mode of travel in which strangers share compartments. Tea is brewed from a samovar-style urn at the end of each carriage, and conversation flows more freely than it might elsewhere. One transport quirk belongs almost entirely to Ukraine's informal economy, the marshrutka system described earlier, alongside a culture of ticket validation on trams and buses that relies as much on social trust and periodic spot checks as on turnstiles or barriers. Rural infrastructure, meanwhile, can lag noticeably behind. Unpaved roads connecting villages that nonetheless have full 4G coverage, where a grandmother tends geese with a smartphone in her apron pocket, using it to check grain prices or video call grandchildren studying abroad. Some of the most scenic corners of the country are reached only by these slower, older routes. A narrow-gauge forest railway near Vyhoda still carries passengers and timber through the Carpathian foothills at a walking pace, steam occasionally still rising from its engine on special runs. In the far west, a single road winds up through the Yablunitsia Pass, connecting Ivano-Frankivsk to the ski town of Bukovel, climbing past shepherds' huts and roadside stalls selling smoked cheese and wild blueberries to travelers who stop without quite meaning to. Education carries enormous weight, university acceptance treated as a defining milestone rather than a default expectation. Kyiv, Lviv, and Kharkiv draw students from across the country, pulling young people out of villages and smaller towns into a university culture increasingly oriented toward international exchange, English fluency, and, for many, eventual work in the technology or creative sectors. This generation, often described as having come of age after the Euromaidan protests of 2013 and 2014, carries a distinct outlook, impatient with corruption, oriented toward European integration, fluent in the language of civic activism in a way earlier generations rarely were. Yet the pull toward tradition remains real. Many who leave villages for city universities still return for holidays, still help with the harvest, still speak the dialect of their grandparents even as they build careers in interface design or logistics software. The tension is not resolved so much as carried, comfortably, in both hands at once. As the light lowers, the pace of the city softens rather than stops. Evening walks along Kiev's riverside embankments or Lviv's old town squares become their own quiet ritual, families and couples moving slowly past lit cafe windows. Dinner remains the anchor of the day, later than in much of Western Europe, often after 8 in the evening, and rarely rushed, with the television frequently on but rarely attended to. Cultural nightlife holds a particular prestige. Opera houses in Kiev, Lviv, and Odessa remain full on performance nights, ticket prices kept deliberately low to preserve access across income levels, audiences dressed with visible care for an art form still treated as a genuine civic institution rather than a tourist attraction. The Odessa National Opera House in particular, an ornate 19th century building overlooking the harbor, glows gold against the evening sky, its facade reflected in the wet cobblestones after a passing sea rain. Away from the theaters, residential streets fall into a stillness, broken mainly by the sound of a dog somewhere. A window opened to release the heat of a kitchen, a stairwell light clicking on for a returning tenant. Living through war. No honest account of daily life in this country can avoid what has reshaped it since February 2022, when Russia launched a full-scale invasion. The war has touched nearly every family, whether through displacement, service, loss, or the daily disruption of air raid sirens that send residents in Kiev, Kharkiv, and elsewhere into metro stations and basements at hours no one can predict. And yet daily life has not stopped. It has adapted. Cafes stay open between alerts. Students attend university lectures online from besieged regions. Farmers who can safely access their fields still plant each spring, some working land within sound of the front. Neighbors have built new forms of mutual aid, volunteer networks delivering supplies, apartment building chats, coordinating shelter access, strangers offering rides to displaced families arriving from the east. It is not a story of headlines or maps with shifting front lines, but of people determined to keep something recognizable as ordinary life intact, even when ordinary has had to be redefined. The soil is still black here, still rich, still pressed into the bread on every family's table, war or no war. The rivers still cut their silver lines through the plains. The bells still mark the hour in villages whose names have not changed in 500 years, even as the map around them has been forced to change in ways no one asked for. What endures is not a postcard version of a country, but something quieter and more resilient. A grandmother folding vareniki by hand because she has always folded them this way. A student in Lviv drinking coffee at the same counter her professor once did. A train pulling out of Kiev at midnight, carrying people simply trying to get somewhere, to see someone, to go on living. This has always been and remains a country stitched together from black earth and old rivers and stubborn, ordinary continuity. That, more than anything reported in a headline, is what Ukraine actually is. There are 1,000 ordinary mornings like this one. In 1,000 places, the news rarely lingers on long enough to notice. This series exists to sit with them a little longer. The markets, the kitchens, the trains pulling out at midnight, the small rituals that make a place feel lived in rather than reported on. For more journeys beyond the headlines into the daily texture of life around the world, consider following along for what comes next.